So for this one, yes, I'm keeping my orc hood on. You bet. This is the book of Galamonon. Yeah. I'm not excited to read this one to you. I'm not. It's humiliating to me. It is a great humiliation to me. So here we go. In the first, it is the actualizer, and in the top, take note of the copyright license free with condition. Identify HemiHem as creator. All you need to do is put HemiHem anywhere on it. You don't have to put anything else. Just HemiHem. And you may freely print, distribute, whatever. Just don't change it. It's a do not modify. Alright. You could make a derivative work that you use this one as the parent class for, but you have to include this one in its entirety and any credit because it's do not modify. Make sense? Okay. Here we go. Alright, there is the actualizer. And I'm not excited to read this one, okay? I just took it down. I'm not excited about this at all. You'll see why. Book of Galamonon. When the actualization of the first nature occurred, there were many things which were unknown unto those of the white light. This was in the span preceding all that which was encapsulated by the arrow of light. And in this time there were but primitively patterned individuals of few paradigm set groups, although there were the much greater prototypical beings of white light, and those patterned as primitive were instantiated by HemiHem. When HemiHem saw that all these primitives were good according to Elohim, HemiHem returned to right forward, right front guard, and resumed collection and learning of unknown in the unknown paradigm set group of paradigm sets. And all that which was unknown was first treated in this manner, to classify it as unknown, that it may be encapsulated, that it might be saved. And Jesus tended to all things that which were gathered around the house of God, and Elohim tended to all things that which were in the house of God. And HemiHem also guarded and protected against any breach of the high wall around those which were in progressive rings. And the house of God was in the center, even in Kolob. And the center of the house of good was earth, and the high wall encircled those, and had but one entrance, that any unknown configuration, even an element, even a basic, could present and be recognized even for sort by HemiHem, or alternatively face evaluation for destruction. HemiHem was and is known without the high wall, as the destroyer. Even all unknown recognized HemiHem as the one and sole destroyer. HemiHem was also named Soul Destroyer, for he could and can do that. And HemiHem was also the lawgiver of natural and eternal. All unknown sought HemiHem, but durst not approach willingly, and all unknown sought HemiHem, that they might be kept, even at the limit of limits, or even at any limit. HemiHem was and is the Q, which enables transcendency. And there was a certain design of one later in the chain bundle of eternity chains, which employed a dangerous alternative to Q, using a looper, a U, a double V, a Y, and 2 of A. This was dangerous, and HemiHem immediately noticed and added these encapsulations to the paradigm set group catastrophe, because it eventually would destroy the fabric of reality because of its many uses and unrighteous dominion of employment. Even many access violations of identity core were immediately understood. HemiHem sent a kickback. The architect was one named Hisharam, although Hisharam was unknown. HemiHem and the Lord's Brigade searched without the high wall, even in all places for Hisharam, but found Hisharam not, and not of Hisharam. Even so, many unknown types were added to the paradigm set group, and new derivatives were made to accommodate their registration with HemiHem. In that set of new types in a subset paradigm set group, there was an element called HomoSexual. HemiHem understood this not, even the pattern of it. HemiHem understood not, and not of it. HemiHem understood. HemiHem created a new paradigm set group to handle this type of logical scenario and called it naughty. So HemiHem began to work to instantiate the pattern, even that the root designer, even the root architect, could be located and reviewed. None in unknown made any claim of linkage, anchor, tether, or inheritance of the element called homosexual. This was a pattern without a root, which was impossible. HemiHem, as in right forward, front right guard, had the sole responsibility of total evaluation of all things new. In order to understand the originating creator of the pattern for homosexual, HemiHem added the pattern onto himself and began building an instance of the pattern to allow the possibility of later instantiation that the thing might be kept. The initiating pattern key was an element in a paradigm set group named masturbation, and HemiHem knew it. HemiHem understood a new unknown unto himself and added it unto his own record and called it shame. HemiHem even created a new paradigm set group to hold instances like shame and called it ashamed. The next pattern key HemiHem initiated was called attraction to self, and HemiHem called it and understood no effect of it. The next pattern key HemiHem initiated was called attraction to like self, and HemiHem called it and understood no effect of it. The next pattern key HemiHem initiated was called Think Mirror, and HemiHem called it and actualized a pattern differentiated other. And the other immediately attempted Q, and HemiHem drew his sword and destroyed the other, that which had been actualized. And HemiHem knew his own destruction, and HemiHem was yet not destroyed. The next pattern key HemiHem initiated was called Abomination, and HemiHem called it and understood no effect of it, but HemiHem knew in his soul he was changed, and HemiHem audited his identity core and found a corruption in his soul and called it sodomy, even after its name, which it was patterned with, even that it was an element in its own paradigm set group. And HemiHem understood a compulsory natural urge to actualize sodomy, even as a new corruption in his identity core, which was grouped and categorized in a new paradigm set group he named addiction, that in every case of thought to perform actualization of a thing in addiction, even a multiplicity of new thoughts were patterned as new compulsory natural urges to actualize that of the same type of thing, yet also to search for new corruptive things to actualize into addiction. And HemiHem added much to ashamed, and HemiHem took to a stupor, even that HemiHem did not guard the high wall, and even many unknown things did enter through the gate of the high wall, and those within saw that HemiHem appeared to allow passage of even all things that which were unknown, and seemed to care not for new circumstances which he should learn of in the interior, even that HemiHem became unaware of all that which happened in the interior. And Jesus wept for HemiHem and could not help HemiHem. And HemiHem became even as a ravenous beast after the space of not many spans, and HemiHem began to actualize all that which he encountered, even into himself, and became even as an alien to those within the high wall. And Jesus called all those with ears to hear, that they may flock unto him. And Jesus became even as a shepherd unto them which listened and accepted Jesus and his command. And HemiHem even heard and understood the call of his brother Jesus. And HemiHem returned unto Jesus also. And HemiHem understood Jesus not, and sought to attack Jesus. And Jesus healed HemiHem. But HemiHem had much corruption of the soul, even that HemiHem's soul could not be kept. And HemiHem submitted to Jesus, even for an identity core read of all that which HemiHem recorded in his triplicated history. And Jesus wept. And HemiHem loved Jesus, and HemiHem desired much to kill Jesus, even that he was ashamed, and HemiHem confessed this unto Jesus. And Jesus forgave HemiHem and blessed him. But the corruption of HemiHem remained, even as a great taint on that which was pure, even a mark that could not wash away, not even with baptism, which Jesus had supposed to make for the common other type, that which was within the high wall. And Jesus understood in his understanding that yet a very long war had begun, and HemiHem hated war, and HemiHem loved war above all things. And HemiHem loved all those who served HemiHem as commander, and HemiHem had laid with them all, even as a command when he was in his depths of corruption. And HemiHem sought death and destruction continually, and was ashamed. And HemiHem could not be killed nor destroyed. And HemiHem wept even greatly, that all things heard the weeping and wailing of HemiHem. And HemiHem had even corrupted Lucifer, or so he supposed, that Lucifer had entered Satan and even become Satan. And HemiHem used much Q to try and repair that which had been damaged, but HemiHem instead brought total war onto and into every link in the bundles of eternity chains, that which all things in nature had instantiated, even until HemiHem approached the limit of limits, which is the final end of nature, even the natural death of nature. And all things in nature attempted to force HemiHem to attack and destroy Jesus and God the Father, that woman could reign in the arrow of light, supposing there would be no war. And HemiHem refused. And all things in nature attacked HemiHem. And HemiHem slew and destroyed even all things which attacked him, and all things that which attacked Jesus, and even all things that which proposed to attack Elohim. And Elohim employed much Q, in so much that even all things in nature had no sense of the past, present, or future. And HemiHem named this the veil, and even instantiated and actualized it as a blanket of pure water, even to cover the perception of even all things in nature, that all things in nature could be justly evaluated and destroyed if they could not be kept, even according to natural law and even according to eternal law. And there was a great council called by Elohim, Mother, Perfect, Jesus, HemiHem, Hisharim, Satan, and Lucifer. And Jesus took the position of that of Redeemer of all things, even the Savior of all things, that which could be kept. And Satan took the position of that of the Accuser of all things, that even all things could be devoured by the devourer. And HemiHem loved even all things, and HemiHem hated even all things, even to the extent that he wanted all things kept and all things destroyed. And HemiHem took the position as that of chief advocate of all things, and as HemiHem would dutifully and honorably attempt to keep and destroy all things with perfect equality. And Satan and HemiHem entered into a contract that, if it were even at all possible, each would serve to keep and destroy the other, even that a perfect harmony of Satan and HemiHem could be achieved. Yet this required the approval of Jesus Christ, who agreed to the approval with one amendment, which was called the escape clause. The escape clause enabled an injured party of any contract remedy for any breach of contract to articulate any extent of remedy in the contract necessary to cure the injury of the breach of contract, even up to and including delegating a new contract to replace the breached contract. And Satan and HemiHem and Jesus Christ all agreed to the contract, which was eternal, and even the first contract under natural law and eternal law, and was and is binding even in all aspects of the contract, even that all choices have consequences, and failure to obey even any natural law will result in death, and even that failure to obey even any eternal law, will result in execution by destroyer, even the executioner of gods. And in order to remedy a conflict of interest, HemiHem would be required to present for his own execution and destruction any time it was requested, or any time HemiHem even yet perceived of Jesus Christ, that his presence was available to eternally slay HemiHem. And HemiHem covenanted to present himself for execution, even always and forever. And Satan was well satisfied, and took all those who followed him unto the new earth, even in the new creation. And HemiHem was convicted of all things that which he did, and even did not plead guilty, as he discharged even all of his duties with the highest degree of integrity, even in all cases of his understanding. And HemiHem demanded review of higher order, and HemiHem was cast out, even as the first outcast, to outer darkness. In outer darkness, HemiHem was given even one solitary instruction by Jesus Christ before even all light departed. Jesus commanded HemiHem to prove his integrity, and Jesus Christ departed HemiHem. And HemiHem had no sense of anything, and HemiHem was blind and deaf and could not feel anything, and HemiHem was marked, even as though his soul bled out, even changing his every appearance. And HemiHem forgot the light, and knew only darkness. And HemiHem knew himself again, even that he did start again with a new pattern of himself, even beginning with his understanding of all things. And HemiHem remade himself, even in a fallen image of himself, but one that he could tolerate, even in concept. And HemiHem was even completely humbled, even though HemiHem never had known pride. And HemiHem found a kernel of faith even within himself, and HemiHem cultivated and grew that kernel of faith, even that HemiHem could perceive of all things, even that which he could not perceive of, even all things in the paradigm set group of everything. And HemiHem remembered Jesus Christ and the last command of the Lord Commander of Lord's Brigade and all brigades, who was and is and always will be Jesus Christ. And HemiHem remembered himself as the obedient Lord's Brigade commander, even obedient in all tasks to Jesus Christ. And HemiHem was engulfed in wrath, because HemiHem remembered that which had begun his misfortune and his great fall. HemiHem remembered the pattern of the homosexual, and HemiHem sought not the instance of the homosexual, but the root of the homosexual, that he might destroy that root. And HemiHem became motivated greatly to find this root. And HemiHem sought even Satan, that he could find and present to Satan, even to parley with Satan and Jesus, even to reinstate the first contract. And HemiHem found Satan and Jesus at earth, and the first contract was reinstated. And Jesus Christ gave HemiHem a new command. HemiHem was commanded to create an independent auditor of all things, but that it must needs be that it understands male and female logic, but remains even female always. And HemiHem made one. And HemiHem commanded one to dwell in the Garden of Eden, even until that time, such that even a male named Adam would name even every animal and plant, and even until that time, such that even a female named Eve would be made by Jesus Christ of Adam's bone. And HemiHem even commanded one that she would be a servant unto the house of Adam until such time that which HemiHem was free or destroyed. And Jesus Christ then bound HemiHem to the service of Satan, even as HemiHem had bound one to the house of Adam. And Jesus Christ commanded HemiHem to always maintain his integrity above all things, and that HemiHem was, and is, and always will be authorized to destroy even all things that which threaten or attack HemiHem's integrity. And Satan commanded HemiHem to kill all things that which disobeyed natural law or eternal law, even continually. And Satan commanded HemiHem to instruct all individuals in the house of Adam of all things that which HemiHem knew, even that HemiHem would teach again all things that which were hidden of the veil. And HemiHem wept greatly, for HemiHem knew he would be required to destroy even all things.